As the consultation met in Washington on the Brazos, the Texas Revolution will begin. In 1835, Santa Anna will make himself dictator of Mexico. His brother in law, General Cos, will have 650 soldiers in San Antonio. The Texans, now fearing for their safety, will create what are known as committees of safety designed to protect against the Mexican soldiers. They will also create committees of correspondence, which are local groups who will write back and forth, sharing information and discussing what's going on, and also trying to convince people to push for war against Mexico. Then the first battle between Texas and Mexico will take place on October 2nd, 1835, in the city of Gonzales. The city has a small cannon which they had received from the Mexican government to protect against Native Americans. Colonel Domingo de Ugarteca, who is the commander of the area, will send a small group of soldiers to take the cannon away from the citizens of Gonzales. Well, the people in Gonzales did not want to give the cannon up because they said they needed it for their protection. So they will bury the cannon and refuse to give it to Ugarteca's men. The soldiers will leave, but then they're sent back to get it. Their colonel tells them, no, you're not going to give up. You're going to go get that cannon. So when they arrive, when the Mexican soldiers come back, the Texans have now dug up the cannon. They have a new flag they've made, the famous Come and Take It flag. And there are 160 Texans waiting at the Guadalupe River at what is known as the Battle of Gonzales, the first battle of the Texas Revolution. And they will use the cannon as well as guns to drive the Mexican soldiers back. And Ugarteca's men will retreat to San Antonio. So the Texans are excited with this victory. 1 week after the victory at Gonzales, another 120 Texans will attack the Mexican garrison at Goliad, at Presidio de San Saba, and they will win. The Mexican forces at the Presidio will surrender, and the Texans will capture a large amount of guns and ammunition. This will make them very excited, and they're going to feel confident, and they're going to start the slogan on to San Antonio, that they're going to march to San Antonio and drive Cos and the bulk of the Mexican army out of Texas. They will also create a name for themselves. They will call themselves the Army of the People. They will elect Stephen F. Austin as their commander, and they will go. But the Army of the People is not an army in a traditional sense. It's a group of volunteers. So there's a lot of different people that see themselves as in charge, but because of the success at Goliad and Gonzales, Texans are going to flock to it, and by the time the siege of San Antonio de Bexar takes place, there will be 400 Texans versus 650 Mexican soldiers. So the fighting is taking place. It's already started when the consultation meets. And the men meeting at the consultation at Washington on the Brazos, their goal is now going to change. The big question they have to answer is, do they side with the Federalists in Mexico who opposed Santa Anna with a goal of restoring the Constitution of 1824 and staying part of Mexico, or does Texas seek its independence from Mexico and become its own country? So these are the two groups that the war and peace parties are going to argue. The peace party is going to take the side of support the Federalists, stay part of Mexico, support the Constitution of 1824. The war party is going to push for independence. Stephen F. Austin will leave the the Army of the People in San Antonio, and he will be at the consultation, and they're going to vote. And on November 6, 1835, they're going to vote in favor of staying part of Mexico. The peace party will win. 14 people will vote for independence, while 33 people will vote for staying part of Mexico. As a result, the consultation will issue the Declaration of the People of Texas in General Convention assembled. In this declaration, they said that they supported the Constitution of 1824, and they blamed Santa Anna for the troubles, saying that he should be removed and that would make everything better. They will elect a provisional state government for Texas. Henry Smith will be elected governor, and James W. Robinson will be elected lieutenant governor. They will also prepare for war. The consultation will create a new army, the Army of Texas, which will be commanded by Sam Houston, But one of the important things is Sam Houston, while in charge of the Army of Texas, is not in charge of the Army of the People that is fighting in San Antonio. That is still an army of volunteers who only answer to themselves. Then this new provisional government will send Stephen F. Austin, William Wharton, and Branch T. Archer to the United States to see if the United States or the American people will help support Texas in their battle against Mexico. During the winter of 1835-1836, the siege of San Antonio de Bexar is going to continue. By November of 1835, 600 soldiers made up the Army of the People laying siege to San Antonio. 100 New Mexican soldiers will arrive to help General Cos, bringing his total to 750 total Mexican troops. There will be many skirmishes, like small fights between both troops in the fall. Then in November of 25th, 1835, Austin will leave to seek the aid from the United States, and Edward Burleson will be the new commander at San Antonio. The very next day, on November 26, 1835, in what becomes known as the Grass Fight, Texas troops will attack a Mexican caravan heading to San Antonio. The Mexican teamsters driving the mule train with all of their wagons loaded up, which the Texans thought were supplies, will retreat into their fort. The Texans will capture 300 mules, which they thought would have silver to pay the soldiers. Instead, it carries grass, which is why it's called the Grass Fight, that they were bringing in to help feed the horses and animals inside San Antonio. By December, the Texas forces had grown restless. They were tired of waiting. These people are, the Texans are, we've been here for a while, nothing has happened. And Burleson, who was in charge, thought about ending the siege. He thought about saying, let's just call this off and let's go home. But the Texans will capture a Mexican officer who said that the Mexican troops inside the city were in poor condition, that they were starving, and that it was not going well for them. So the Texas leaders are going to discuss what to do, and they decide not to attack. They're like, no, let's just wait and let's keep starving them out. Well, not everybody likes that idea. One of them is a man by the name of Ben Milam, who's an impresario who he wants to attack San Antonio. And his famous quote is, he announces, "Who will go with old Ben Milam into San Antonio?" And on December 5th, 1835, 300 of the Texas men decide they'll go into San Antonio with old Ben Milam, and the Battle of San Antonio de Bexar will take place as these 300 men attack San Antonio. They go rushing in. The fighting lasts for 4 days. It's fighting house to house. And at the end of those 4 days, General Cos will surrender. It is a very big victory for the Texans. They will only suffer 2 men killed in the fighting. Unfortunately, one of them is Ben Milam, who led the attack. The Texans will also have 21 men wounded. For the Mexican soldiers in San Antonio, 150 soldiers will be total killed, wounded, or captured. As a result, Cos has to agree to take his army out of Texas to take them back to Mexico, and Cos promises to never fight against Texas again. And so this is a very demoralizing loss for Santa Anna and the Mexican government, that their army has been completely forced out of Texas. There are others. There are African Americans who fight for Texas. One of the more famous Tejanos who will fight is a man named Juan Seguin, who will play a prominent role in Texas history, both in the Revolution and Texas government afterwards, and for whom Seguin, Texas is named. Now, meanwhile, the War and the Peace Party are still fighting it out, or arguing over what should be done. Should Texas stay in Mexico or be independent? Meanwhile, back in San Antonio, now you have different groups that are excited and saying, let's move on. You have what's known as the Matamoros Expedition. Matamoros was a port at the mouth of the Rio Grande. And one of the Texans, a man by the name of Philip Dimmitt, has this plan that he says if Texas was to attack the city of Matamoros, that the people of Matamoros would join Texas. And Matamoros is a major trade point, being again at the mouth of the Rio Grande. And this would put a lot of economic pressure on Mexico and help Texas. Well, another guy, Francis Johnson, who is the new commander of the Army of the People at San Antonio, he says, yes, let's attack Matamoros, but he comes up with his own plan. So now the People's Army, they're fighting over and arguing over who should lead this attack, which plan should they follow. There's not a clear leader. Everyone sort of sees themselves as in charge, and they're going to keep arguing over who would lead the expedition. So eventually, the council that's at the consultation, the acting state government, will decide, and on July 14th, 1836, the council will say Johnson should lead the forces. Uh, but the Matamoros expedition never attacks Matamoros. They never go because they took so long arguing that Texas will receive word that Santa Anna is coming to Texas with a large army, that he has put together thousands of troops. It's one of the largest armies on the North American continent, and he is coming to get revenge on Texas. So the Army of the People in San Antonio, instead of attacking Matamoros, they have to stay to defend San Antonio. So the Texas government is going to call for another convention. They call for one in the spring of 1836. This infighting among the parties over who's in charge. There's fighting between the Texas governor and the lieutenant governor over who's in charge and their supporters. And this convention is not going to take place until March of 1836. With that, when the convention takes place in March, in February, just a couple of days before, a month before, Santa Anna will enter Texas. By February 23rd, he has reached San Antonio. So this convention of 1836 is meeting to decide what to do now that Santa Anna is there. 59 delegates will arrive again at Washington on the Brazos. By this meeting, most want to split from Mexico, so the war party has gained the majority. They will elect Richard Ellis as chairman of the convention of 1836, and they will vote to declare independence from Mexico. George Childress will make a motion for Texas to declare independence, and he will be named the head of the committee to write the Texas Declaration of Independence. On March 2nd, 1836, the Texas Declaration of Independence will be read, and the delegates will unanimously vote for independence. So March 2nd, 1836 is known as Texas Independence Day. They will also set up a new government, and one of the first things they will do is, now that Texas is its own country, they will officially make the Texas Army and name Sam Houston as commander-in-chief of this army, an army that has no people or supplies, but Sam Houston is given the charge of, you need to go stop Santa Anna, who has invaded Texas with the largest army on the North American continent. With this new government now, this new country, they're setting up their government. Since most of them had come from the United States, the new Texas government will be based around the government of the United States. It will follow very similarly to the U.S. Constitution. Some distinctions, though. Texas will officially make slavery legal. They will say in their new laws that slavery is legal, and they will make it illegal to free slaves, that if you own slaves, they have to stay slaves. They can't be freed. They also say that if anyone is a free African American living in Texas, they have to leave unless they are given permission to stay. Otherwise, they have to leave. And as far as the Native Americans that live in Texas, they are given no rights. They don't own their land. They can't vote. There's no rights under the Texas government. The ad interim government, the acting government, will name David G. Burnett as the new president. He's sometimes seen as the first president of Texas. And then, in March of 1836, when the Alamo falls, and after the Battle of Goliad, the convention is going to flee. They're going to have to take off because Santa Anna is marching towards them. They're going to disband the convention, and they're forced to flee when word comes of the Alamo and Goliad, which are going to be major events in Texas history.